Good afternoon. Welcome to Eretz Yisrael. I'm Avram Shira. We're finishing up Baruch Hashem, Torah 80 in Likutei Moharan. This is probably the 8th lesson, I believe, of this Torah, and we've worked at paragraph by paragraph, concept by concept, rung after rung of this ladder of ideas that takes us full circle to the beginning of the Torah. That peace, the Rebbe says, is the vessel. This is from the sages of the Talmud. Peace is the vessel for blessing. Now, a lot of people want blessing because we need blessing for children and blessing for health and blessing for money and blessing for a house. There's a lot of blessings we need out there. But what the Talmud is teaching us, and the Rebbe reiterates here, Rabbi Nachman, is that you have to have the vessel or you won't get those blessings. And the vessel of blessing is peace, personal peace, communal peace, peace with the world, and especially peace with God. And I'd be surprised, a lot of people are not at peace with God. They're upset. They're upset about the Shoah. They're upset about their own lives. They're upset about their families. And so we have a problem here. We have a problem of blame. And blaming God is the very first thing that will get us disconnected from our higher soul. And that's not why we're here. We're here to reconnect and recharge and reinvigorate life with connection to the higher soul. Now, that higher soul has many layers and many levels. We're not going to get into that structural Kabbalah, but on my Patreon page, there's a whole section in the Shara Gilgulim. There's a series on reincarnation, and in that series we discuss the 25 layers of the soul. Okay, so we're at the last paragraph now, so let's stop the introduction, redo, and get on with it. And Nimsa shiyotzei lanu mizeh etzah nifla'a la'avodat Hashem. We find from everything that we've been learning so far. I'm not going to go over it all now. You'll have to look at the 7 other classes, maybe not all 7, but whatever works for you. An Eitzah Nifla, a wondrous advice for Avodat Hashem, and I call it the imaginary death. Imaginary death. Now, how is that a great advice for serving God? And he says, Befrat b'shat tefillah, especially at the time of prayer, a person sees he tries to pray and he can't. Now, we're not talking about reading from a book. We're talking about praying to the creator of the universe. We're talking about praying to the entire universe with a capital U, because he's the sustainer and the animator of that whole system. And we see that the heart is closed and the words don't come and we don't want to talk and we'd rather just move on. But sometimes we need to pray. Sometimes we know we need to do so. And he tells us, okay, another problem that comes is that we're not able to attach our thought to our speech. That what I'm thinking about in my head is not happening in my mouth. That there's a distance. And that also obviously includes the heart, where I'm emotionally charged, or the opposite, not charged, where a person doesn't have feeling. But the distance of the thought itself to the dibur, to the speech, closes down the speech. And we don't want to pray even more. Vazai, a person should remember to himself, remind himself that he would certainly be willing to die for God if so it was called upon him to do. And back in the day, it was a little more prevalent, sorry to say, as horrible it is to think about it. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, etc., back in Europe, back in the Middle East, wherever the Jews have been, there has been horrible outbursts of rage and anger. Why that is another that's a novel, that's a PhD. You want to find out why the world hates the Jew. But what we do know is that we had to go through it, and people went through it, and they accepted it. They accepted the idea of dying for Hashem. And a person remembers that, what happens? Remember, this is in the context of how I get to the level of wanting to pray and attaching my thought to my speech. And all of that is to get to the level of having the inner peace to receive blessing in the first place, because the world is filled with blessing. It's just not falling in my basket all the time. So the basket, of course, is this union of the mind and our speech, where our words are all flowing through the same closed, integrated, unified system. Now, when I say closed, I mean from the external forces. He remembers that he'd be willing to die, even though the person is at whatever level he's at, which is a euphemism for saying at a very low level. Even at the lowest of levels. If a person came along and said, disacknowledge the God of the Jews and take on the God of the Christians, or the God of the Muslims, or the God of the Hindus, or the God of the Buddhists, or the God of any other group that wants you to take on their God, chas v'shalom, certainly a Jew would automatically say, no way, I'm not taking on your dumb God. I have a hard enough time with my God. Now you want me to take on your God? Forget it. You got too many gods and too many too many escape routes. We can't escape when there's only one God. It fills the universe. Ki al ze mirutza afilu b'poshe Israel. Even the sinners of the Jews are willing and happy to die for God if they try to move them away from their basic belief system. Because a person can be a sinner and go out and rob every bank in town and still believe in God. And he will not give up, nevertheless, his belief in the Jewish view, the Jewish perspective of God. And we see with our senses endless times, uncountable times that this has been the case. It's more that a person remembers immediately that he is willing to give his soul back to God. Immediately he gets peace. Peace. Now look at the equation. You're willing to die for Hashem and you get personal peace. Why is that? Well, maybe in the simplest way of explaining it, by being willing to pass away, what is there to get upset about? If you're willing to give yourself over to God and die, why would I not be at peace? Because all the things that take away my peace are small little details of this world. Things that are not right the way I want them, or the way that are difficult. But when we are willing to give up our life to Hashem, all of a sudden we get peace. That's that vessel for blessing. And this is the aspect of Yosef, who was the concept of the unifier of the forces in the kingdom, and that's why he became the second in command of Egypt. He could unify the whole place. And that part of that unifying the whole place is unifying our minds and our words, our mouth. And because we have that peace, which is that joining the brain, our thoughts with our speech. In other words, to think what you say and say what you think and be straight and true all the time. That's a high level, but of course that's what we have to work for. But by doing that, again, we create that vessel of peace, which brings blessing. And so too Rabbi Natan writes that he heard from the holy mouth of Rabbi Nachman himself, She'amar zot, b'chinat sichato ha'kedusha l'davar pashut. He says that he said it in the midst of his everyday talk. It wasn't like he sat down to give a formal class. He was just having conversation with people. And in his holy conversation, he said it's a simple thing, that we need to pray at this level of self-sacrifice that brings all this other chain reaction of a vessel, which gathers blessing, which helps, our joy, obviously. And as the Ramchal says, when you get new blessing, it actually, if it's from the holy side of blessing, because there is unholy blessing, we don't want those millions, because they'll destroy everything you ever built. But we want the holy blessing, is that which makes you want to learn more, want to pray more, see how important your prayer is, see how much good your learning does into the world and brings into your family life and to the minds and hearts of others. and even out there on the dark web, there's connections being made with all corners of creation. And those connections are part of the bigger messianic vision of the future world, where everybody is not Jewish, but everybody gets the idea of one God and has our own, each individual relationship to that. So that's what we're working for. That's what we believe in. And anything short is, well, a short change. So we don't need that. We want the full item, the full Monty, as they used to call it. And God should bless you all with the blessing that comes from the peace, that comes from joining the pieces of ourselves, the opposites, the contradictions, the pains, and unify them and solve them. And then everything good happens, one after the other. Okay, so Rosh Hashanah is coming. Have a great new year. Today is the third day of the week, as they say in Hebrew, and we have a few more days to prepare. So take out your machzor, open it up, and just look through it. Look through the table of contents. It's going to make you feel good. It's going to ground you. It's going to root you in this holy, holy 2 days of service to renew this year and this planet and this race and this people. All the best. Hag Sameach.